Good afternoon or good evening, wherever you may be listening to us from, here on this big, beautiful planet we call Earth. This is Michael Cross here with another edition of Unlock the Door Radio here on UCY TV Productions. Hey, I've got a very interesting question for you. What if the left was actually successful at eliminating religion? Now, think about that. We're going to come back to that in just a moment. First, I would like to make a little plug here. And that's, if you like sci-fi that actually examines maybe what the left really thinks when it comes to religion and, why maybe the elite have a different perspective for what religion should be than they think the common people should have, then check out my novel, The Destiny of Our Past. And you can look that up on Amazon. Also, check the comment section and you can go to my official website. But enough of the plugging, kind of the Edward Bernays thing here. I'd like to deal with that whole issue of what if the left got rid of religion. I think, if we think about John Lennon's old classic song, Imagine, and it kind of, essentially the one thing you pick up from that is this kind of leftist, maybe not necessarily all left, because there are people who are conservative that would like to see an end to religion. But essentially, let's just say that it had that kind of idea of imagine there's no religion and everyone just got along together and that sort of thing. And it's kind of an idealistic way of seeing the world. And maybe, I think, a dreamy way of seeing the world. Because I don't think that's actually, I don't think that would actually result from eliminating religion. Not in the least. And I'd like to just kind of go through what would happen. What would happen if all of a sudden tomorrow you woke up and you found out that everyone had renounced religion and, it was going to be churches and synagogues and mosques and whatever, all closed and there was, just for some reason everyone just stopped believing. I don't necessarily think that would be good. Now, I'm going to go through a whole bunch of reasons why that is, but first of all, the human spirit. I think the human spirit does strive for meaning in life. Okay? I don't know how much an animal perceives the world in regards to its place in the world. Not sure a rat would contemplate what its meaning of existence is. I don't think any creature on Earth has that ability except for humans. And unfortunately, a lot of humans even forego thinking about that. Or at least they try to repress it. I think everyone ultimately does think about it, but some people are better at repressing it than others. And so I think the human spirit needs to have also a sense of uniqueness. Now, if we believe that we are all just the product of evolution, then that means we're kind of taking maybe an extreme B.F. Skinner sort of way of looking at it, like we are just the sum of our learning and synapses and brain activity. And once that stops, we stop completely. That which is you, which you perceive right now, thinking about who you are, what you've contributed, what you will contribute, your dreams, hopes, aspirations. If you look at it that way, then you cease to exist when you die. And your pile of matter is of no more importance than a dead dog, a dead rat, for that matter, a dead tree. And, your little time period here, it all ends then. And that kind of gets us into kind of this, what would lead to nihilism. But I'll come back to that. Now, what would you do in reference to keeping society unified? Now, some people think, but look at the least religious countries. Look at countries like Oh, for instance, the Scandinavian countries, don't they do just fine? Well, first of all, I would argue as to whether they're truly atheistic. Many people in Scandinavia are either very nominally Christian or they are they have kind of agnosticism that acknowledge something is out there. I mean, there's a lot of popularity in Scandinavia with things like, paranormal type of exploration and so forth. I think ultimately, though, it would, if you had the whole world being this way, you would have to have something to distract people. Now, Edward Bernays gave us the idea that humans are irrational and that they have to be in some way controlled by consumerism. He's not the one who came up with the irrationality. He came up with the part about controlled by consumerism. And so, in a sense, the idea that you could get people to maybe replace God with some sort of competition, careerism, trying to make more money than the other person, just making life into like one big, long marathon. When you're on a marathon, you're just trying to beat the other people, and you're feeling pretty good as you pull ahead of others, and so forth. And, consumerism as a religion, a replacement of religion, seems to be the same thing. Keep people occupied with all the new gadgets and all the new status and so forth. And then if they just want to have some free time to engage in something beyond, then they can exercise their imagination through watching TV or going to movies or music or gaming or whatever. Okay, that would be one area that you could divert the human spirit. And another one could be nationalism. I think ultimately, if you study Nazi Germany, and there are people who say, oh, but it was religious. Oh, no, it wasn't religious, or blah, 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 whatever. But ultimately, if you get right down to it, it was sort of like a Darwinism mixed with paganism and a few pieces here and there of the Christian traditions. Not much, just kind of on the outside. And could the society have lasted if, for instance, there would not have been the war, or they would have come up with the atomic bomb first and won the war? I actually don't think so. I don't think so. I think the idea of striving for some sort of what you could call a false ego projection. What I mean false is that you're part of a living organism as a society because you are, for instance, German, or take it to today, for instance, because you are American. Being an American is something, yes, you do share certain values and heritage and hopefully some core beliefs of, freedom and so forth from, with everyone else. But ultimately, you are an individual. And other people, they're not connected to you like family. Okay? Family, they care about you. They care what happens to you. People on the street, they don't. Sorry, they don't. And, all of you could be replaced at work, within what? One day? Maybe a week? If you have a really important position? Anyone can be replaced. So get past that idea that, you're just totally special because, you're you and you're the best at your profession, because they could probably find someone just as good. If they're not as good, they can become as good in time. How many of you could, you can't remember the names of most of your teachers. And we usually think of teachers as being this, idealized, giving sort of individual who's there to impart knowledge and help guide you through life, at the very beginning so that you'll have the skills necessary later. But they can be the most absolutely dedicated people in the world, and most of us still don't remember most of our teachers' names through grade 1 through 12. Okay? And you probably don't remember hardly any of your professors that you had in university, if you went to university. So, you've got that whole thing, well, I'll just throw that out there. You've got nationalism. Well, it would only go so far. You've got careerism, which, again, is connected to consumerism, but it doesn't answer the questions. So essentially, I think you actually come up with nihilism. And, whether you pronounce that nihilism, I've had professors that pronounce it nihilism, some that pronounce it nihilism. Doesn't matter. The thing is that ultimately it becomes kind of the ethic if you get rid of any sense of religion in the society, because you cease to have that sort of, I'm special, I was created with a purpose. Okay, something metaphysical. And, if you think about it this way, all that knowledge and skills, if you think that way, all that fantastic knowledge and skills that Stephen Hawking had, well, that was gone within 5 minutes of when he stopped breathing. Okay? Gone. And you might think, yeah, but the contributions are still out there in society. But in 100 years from now, no one's going to know who he was. All right? Unless they're maybe studying some sort of history or something of physics during this time period. So, no. That doesn't hold meaning. Now, we could see where that could kind of leave a person a little bit psychologically maybe like, whoa, that kind of sucks and so forth. But how would that manifest itself in regards to society in general? Well, I've seen surveys that have shown that the more religious a person is, the more children they tend to have. And that is cross-cultural. And I think there might be some exceptions, like with China, where everyone has kind of there's somewhat of a limit on how many kids you can have. But overall, if you live in a Muslim country, 100% Muslim, the most devout have the most kids. Now, some people say, well, yeah, but that could be socioeconomic. Yeah, it can be socioeconomic, but what came first, the chicken or the egg? I mean, if you're a very devout Muslim and you've got 12 kids, maybe you're not going to be able to afford to live in the nicest neighborhood, even though your job may be very similar to a person who does live in the nicest neighborhood. So to say that, oh yeah, well, it's just the people that have any skills or anything, that have big families and they're, and so forth. No. There are other factors involved. Although you could say the more learning a person has, the longer they stay out of the reproductive phase of their life, by and large, especially if they're women, and then therefore they don't have as many kids as someone who maybe didn't go for education. But beyond that variable, I would say that still, religion plays a huge factor. If you look at Israel, it's the ultra-Orthodox that tend to have the big families, whereas the more Reformed Jews have small families with conservatives somewhere in between. And in America, you'll see the most, even within religions that strive to push the idea that you should have a large family, like let's say Catholics or Mormons, you'll generally find it's the most devout of the Catholics and most devout of the Mormons who tend to have the largest family. So, I think that when you look at then secular, someone who's atheist, they tend to have very small families. If you looked at the Soviet Union, now there were other variables such as the size of apartments and stuff like that if you lived in Moscow or St. Petersburg, but it tended to be that women for decades after the Second World War. I mean, there's this huge baby boom that took place after the war, but then it went down to where the average Russian woman even though there was all kinds of incentives to have kids, the average Russian woman had barely over one kid per woman up until present day. I know Putin's trying to change that. I don't know how successful he'll be, but the thing is that, within a very secularized society, as the Soviet Union was, the birth rates didn't, the places that still had the highest birth rates were areas where religion was still a powerful force, such as the Muslim republics of that time, the Kazakhstan and Tajikistan and so forth. So religion plays a huge factor in that. I would speculate that without religion, now some people may like this idea. If you're like a big fan of, that Georgia Guidestones, which I don't know that much about. I don't even know who put it up. But it has that goal of, the world should have 500 million people, no more. And the thing is, I guess if you support that, then fine, you wouldn't mind this. But I think if you got rid of religion, I think your birth rate would plummet everywhere in the world. I really do. I think it would just go down. Because having children is a sacrifice. And so if you feel that God put you here for a purpose and you're helping to extend this wonderful calling, then you're going to welcome the idea of sacrifice. But on the other hand, if you're just like, if you're a woman, I have to devote 9 months here, and then I've got this child I'm going to have to raise, it's going to be, you may feel like, well, maybe I'll have one, so I'll feel fulfilled as a mother. So I can be all around experience what it is to be a woman. And the same would be true for men, although I'm not as sure as many men feel that way as women do in my personal experiences. So I think the birth rates would plummet if you got rid of religion for obvious reasons. Now, would the crime rate go up? I don't necessarily think so. I think a lot has to do with the culture and the cultural expectations. Although if by getting rid of religion that also could tear away traditions, I think you would have some problems there. You might actually see more crime. The other thing, though, related, and that's on a personal level, but at the government level, if there's no religion, then I'm wondering if we might see more wars and more persecution of people. Now, if you only have I go to Facebook and I read memes that people post, idea of history of the world and geopolitical concerns, then you might be taken in by that idea that, almost all wars have been a factor of religion. Untrue. In fact, many of the wars that had something to do with religion, at least on the outer, surface of it, were ultimately economic. Okay, many of the people, who took part, whether they be, maybe Muslims when they were trying to take over Europe, or the Crusaders when they were trying to push into the Middle East, plunder was always something that could come in as a fringe benefit. So yes, you may have told your true believers, yes, we're doing this and in the name of, and then also that your sins will be forgiven you if you die in battle. That could be kind of a psychological motivation, but ultimately the big push was, getting resources. The Vikings, before that, they didn't go and go all over Europe in order to spread the religion of Odin. They instead went into various parts of Europe in order to either get land or to set up trading posts or so forth. So it was resources. All right. It wasn't just brute force. Let's go beat up some people, because you can't organize people on that flimsy of motivation beyond maybe 5 or 6 people. No, if you want to have what would be considered a raiding party, then you needed to have more of a sense of this is something to increase the wealth, especially amongst young men who might not be connected into the society economically or when it came to family. I mean, maybe you'll find yourself a wife if you go raid Britain or Ireland or whatever. So ultimately, if we look at let's keep going. All the wars of the 19th century that absolutely devastated Europe. I mean, if you think about where Europe could have extended itself if all the men who died in battles from Napoleon all the way through the 19th century, the 1800s, if they would have just, either built up the infrastructure within Europe or fanned out into other areas of the world, as many Spaniards and Italians did when they went into Argentina and Uruguay and southern Brazil, or, Irish and Germans who went to America. This would have extended the infrastructure and reach of Europe. If you look at World War I and II, none of those wars had anything to do with religion. So now we're talking about 200 years. Religion had nothing to do with it. The Vietnam War, nothing to do with religion. The Korean War, nothing to do with religion, unless you want to consider communism as a pseudo-religion, philosophical religion. But, and again, when I said the thing about Nazism, you can't consider it a religion, and it certainly wasn't trying to extend the reach of Christianity. All right? I mean, most of the people it conquered and crushed in war were either Jews or Christians. So, I don't think they were trying to spread the Bible or anything like that. At least I've never heard of any armies going somewhere and taking a copy of the Bible with them to, help convert people to Lutheranism or Catholicism. Now, that takes us into the modern day, and people are thinking, what about Syria? Well, Syria comes close. But then again, why is America in there? Why is Russia in there? Why are other countries, Saudi Arabia, in there? Saudi Arabia, it may be a religious basis, but America and Russia, it's more economic. Actually, Saudi Arabia and Qatar and all these countries, you could throw in economics as well, which connects to religion, but it's not, perhaps the primary thing that gets people to part with their resources to help organizations there. So I don't think getting rid of religion would bring peace to the world. In fact, people would still break apart according to ethnicity. They would still break apart according to, I am in this part of the world and I have this standard of living, and you're in that part of the world, you have that standard of living. And if you try equalizing that out through some sort of worldwide socialistic type of government, I don't think that would work very well. You could have rebellion. So ultimately, getting rid of religion would not bring peace. And would it make people more intelligent? I actually think opposite. And you're probably wondering, what? Why is that? Doesn't religion hold people back? No. I think having a I think one of the things that's actually caused a lot of highly religious people in America and maybe even Europe to veer away and have kind of a negative feeling towards, for instance, science, is because there's such an emphasis on, no, you can't be religious. You got to believe that we're here because of evolution. I knew kids when I was in school that they didn't like science that much. They thought I was atheist because I like science so much. And I'm like, no, I really like science. But there is this kind of sense that if you had to either be religious or you had to either be into science. And I think the opposite is actually true, but But there are people that feel that way. And I always found the more I knew about how things operated and the complexity of life, be it biological or even physical, that just, was like more of a confirmation of religion to me. But anyway, I think that maybe if you have a sense of nihilism in the world, if you got rid of religion, maybe the only thing that would really promote the idea of people wanting to know a lot about science would be the idea of making money off of it. So maybe in a sense, pure science, the idea of just studying it to be good at it and maybe make some discoveries that'll just be interesting, might lose some of its interest. I mean, this is debatable. It depends on the person. I'm sure we could spend hours, debating something if we had a group of people together. But I think that a lot of people would actually lose that sense of wonder and awe of the universe. We got to remember John Locke and Newton and all these kinds of people that were very important in formulating what we now know as the scientific method and a lot of theories when it comes to how the universe operates. They were trying to find out how God did it. They weren't just like, well, let's push God out of it. Although later people came along and kind of used it for that purpose. Now, other factors, I think you could actually have more authoritarianism because people might, religion has in one sense, controls people. And that is that a lot of people that might normally want to do something bad or contemplate doing something bad suddenly veer away from doing something bad because they feel that God will punish them in not only this life, but maybe the life to come. And so they decide not to do it. Now, I think in many respects this may deal more with socio-moral type of things. Should you have sex with someone when you're not married to them? If they do get pregnant, or you get pregnant, should you have an abortion? I think these are more the socio-moral factors that come in regards to religion. Should you go out and get drunk? Should you do this? Should you do that? But when it comes to crimes, I think that still has a sense of, most of us probably would not go rob a bank whether we were atheist or not. And why wouldn't we do that? Two reasons. One is the fear of getting caught and thrown in jail for 20 years. Or B, you get killed in the process of trying to do something major like that. So it would be kind of a sense of, everyone thinks of what it would be like to commit a crime, but the fear of failure and the fear of punishment come in and stop you from taking it to maybe a logical next step. Now, of course, when there's riots and looting and stuff like that, many people who normally are good, they see a sense of, oh, well, everyone else is doing it. So it gives them somewhat of a permission to do something wrong. Or it gives them a sense that I won't get caught. Now, imagine if the factor that you knew you could get away with something, but you don't do it because you're afraid that God would punish you, and I'm sure everyone has experienced that. What if it didn't exist? Well, I think people would most likely, like I said before, the socio-moral thing, they'd be more likely to do things that are considered more sinful than criminal. But then there would be others who would take it to the criminal realm and not feel bad, especially if you feel like, oh my gosh, I've got this many years to live and, here's the kind of job I'll have, and I'll just have this little home and this little car and this little wife and this little husband or this little this or this or this. Whereas that kind of sense of, if I could do something big, I might be able to get lots of money from it. Well, that might come in. Or just the thrill seeker people might be more likely to take those thrills a little bit further. I mean, I've said in shows in the past, many people who are psychopathic don't do something wrong because they believe in God. And therefore, they feel that if they do something wrong, God will punish them in the end. So, it keeps them good. Although they may not feel guilt or shame or, empathy in those same ways that regular people do, they still don't want to, if they belong to a religion that believes in hell, burn forever. So they avoid doing those things. They may even do really good things for people in the sense of helping people so that, it gives them a better position in the afterlife. But nevertheless, the belief in religion maybe keeps them from doing stuff that they normally would do if given the opportunity. So, also, what kind of feeling of connectiveness would we have if we didn't have religion? Religion gives us a sense of belonging that takes us out of just being a family, but gives us a sense of being part of something bigger. Nationalism, I don't think cuts it in the long run. And, I said before, consumerism and so forth. So I don't think you'd have that same sense of belonging. So we'd have a lot more lonely people, more nihilistic people. So ultimately, I can go on and on and on, but ultimately, those people that try to promote the idea of a utopianism that would see no religion, I think are only seeing things one-dimensionally. And I think often what they do, and this would be more likely to fit those people that consider themselves secular humanists, is they feel that you can have all of the good of religion, all of the benefits of religion without being religious. And I think that's what we see in many European areas that are highly secular, is that it was only a generation ago that they were highly religious. And so, at least by comparison to what they are today. And so those societal norms are still in effect, but given another generation or two, I'm not sure that would be the case. I think you would see some of these other things I've talked about. Once, grandma and grandpa die, and then mom and dad die, and your kids and then your grandkids who've had no connection to religion, are just kind of on their own in life. So ultimately, I think that religion is a very good and very positive force in society, and that it's naive to think that you can get rid of religion and still keep the society as it remains, or even think that it's going to get better without that sense of belonging. On the more positive end, the sense of knowing you're special and your place in the universe on the positive end, or maybe even the negative end, just the idea of, people staying good because they don't want to take the consequences of doing something wrong. So ultimately, forget it. If you think that, we'll be a freer and healthier and happier society without religion, I think that's extremely naive. And it is not going to be the case.